Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with Atlanta-born, Los Angeles-based jazz pianist, vocalist, composer, and arranger, Adrianne Duncan. She opened up about her newest 2021 CD, Gemini, her life in music, COVID, and so much more. She has a family steeped in music and had aspirations to act when she arrived to the West Coast. It's a great story, and she explains it all. Enjoy.
Yes, Joe Domino, Neon Jazz Radio in Kansas City.
Hey, thanks for calling.
Absolutely. You know, speaking of regions and geography and things that are going on, we're on the tail end of a pandemic, and you have new material, and there's a chance to perform it live with the absence of this for going on 18 months. So talk to me a little bit about your feelings on new material and the chance to finally communicate directly to fans.
Okay, that's an interesting question. New material and the chance to communicate it directly. Well, I mean, I think that certainly in the spirit of jazz, you know, all music is constantly evolving, right? And, you know, I was just saying to somebody the other day that I don't think there's been sort of a new complete genre of music kind of invented since rap, unless you're talking about like, you know, a subgenre. So, I mean, it's sort of like on the one hand, there's nothing new under the sun, but by the same token, you know, everybody has a voice, everybody has something new to say. You know, there's certainly, you know, if you're talking about, you know, tunes that have lyrics, there's certainly, you know, new ideas to communicate, new stories to communicate, you know, and new ways to do it. So, you know, if you're talking specifically about, you know, the pandemic and kind of what developed during the pandemic, I mean, I think that people, you know, really got creative, you know, as creative as they could, you know, with finding new media, you know, and new ways to get their music out there. You know, obviously streaming has been around for a while, but people are still kind of wrapping their brains around that. But certainly things like live streaming performances and, you know, anything involving, you know, Zoom or FaceTime or, you know, Instagram Live or Facebook Live or anything like that. You know, I think people got really creative with that stuff. I feel like people that love music will always find it, you know what I mean, somehow. So I think that, because I mean, I think it's sort of twofold, because one, you know, for one, you make the music, you know, you write it and you make it, but that's a little bit of, certainly composing is a little bit of a lonely endeavor. But I don't think, so I mean, I think if you sit in your room by yourself and you write music, you're still a musician, you're still a composer, you know, even if nobody hears it. But I don't think most people, you know, want to be Emily Dickinson, you know, and die and have a whole treasure trove of poems uncovered after your death. I mean, I do think that most people want to get their music out there, and certainly music is a group activity, you know, for the most part. I think the writing and composition of it, you know, and always wanting to create something new and push the art form, you know, forward and find your own voice. I mean, that's one aspect of it. And then finding platforms and ways to get the music out to the public is another. But I mean, you know, unfortunately, nothing beats live. You know, nothing beats a live performance, especially for jazz. And even if, you know, and I've seen so many streaming shows, and, you know, I mean, it's great, and I'm so glad we had it. I'm so glad that this pandemic didn't happen in an age when that stuff hadn't been invented. You know, this would have been very different. But you know, but yeah, nothing beats live. So hopefully we'll be able to get back to live shows soon. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. So as you already mentioned up top, you're from Atlanta. Talk to me a little bit about, you know, your dad was a guitarist. You know, you've had a varied history in playing piano and screenwriting and different things. Was music always something that was kind of like going to be your life? Did you always want to be a professional musician?
You know, originally I was very, very much on that classical track, right? So I was a competitive classical pianist by the time I was 8, and so that was literally my life. I mean, I was the kid that got up early, practiced, went to school, came home, practiced, did my homework, practiced, had dinner with my family, you know what I mean? Like, so, and in the summertime, you know, I was going to music camps or, you know, working at home. I was the kid that was practicing 9-10 hours a day. So yeah, I was very, very much on that classical path. But that will definitely, you know, burn you out. And so by the time I was about a senior in high school, freshman in college, I knew I needed a break. And I think sort of intuitively as well, I kind of knew, because I had been so sort of stunted socially by being in a room by myself for most of the time, because even though I did other things, and I played with my dad, So, he and I had like a little duo act, which was pretty awesome. We played at, a lot of, colleges and did concerts and stuff like that. And I played in a symphony for 4 years, and I did tons of chamber music and all that kind of stuff. It's still mostly piano. Classical piano is mostly a solo endeavor. So that's when I switched to acting. And so then at that point, I wanted to just 100% be a professional actor. I put music on the back burner, but I kept singing though. So I kept singing, but for some reason in my mind, singing and piano were very, very separate. I did not realize that I could accompany myself, which I know sounds a little bit bizarre, but classical music will kind of warp you to a certain extent. So I really didn't realize that I could do it. And I also didn't realize that jazz was something that could actually be taught. I thought it was just something that people did and that I couldn't do it because I grew up listening to jazz. My parents were huge jazz fans, and I wore out the Keith Jarrett current concert record. I could sing that record to you, note for note. I listened to it over and over as a kid, and Bill Evans and, Ella and all these great people. So I grew up with it, but I just didn't play it. So then it wasn't until later. I moved to LA for acting, actually. Then I kind of fell into, there's such an amazing creative jazz scene here. So it was just literally through a fluke, through one event that I met a bunch of people that would sort of change my direction, that were kind of a big part of the creative jazz scene here, most notably Amaro Ruiz, who's one of my close friends, and really just kind of took me in that direction. And then I realized that I wanted to switch back to music. But I'm so glad. I'm really, really glad that I experienced, acting and theater, and I really, really delved into that because I think that helps so much as a performer and as a writer and as a lyricist. Because I really didn't. I mean, I was just this classical kid with no social skills that had been stuck in a closet. So, so it was very, very helpful for me. So again, though, each time I was very determined to pursue that path, but then once I was out of that path, I was out of it, but yeah, now it's music, 100%.
Yes. So what kind of culture shock was it to go from Atlanta to LA?
Well, there was Chicago in the middle. So, because I went to Northwestern. So I went from Atlanta to Chicago to LA. So, they're all big cities. And, it's so funny as a kid. I think I was a really snobby little kid because Atlanta felt so small to me. I always wanted to go to New York. New York was kind of like the dream for me. So Chicago was sort of like a version of New York. So it's interesting because, Chicago is much more of sort of a classically urban type city. And then LA actually reminds me much more of Atlanta. The topography, it's much more spread out, the weather, so when I came to LA, it really, really felt very familiar to me in a way that the Midwest kind of didn't necessarily, and I still love New York, and I've gone there a ton and visited there a ton. I've never lived there though, but maybe we'll see. But I love LA though. I love LA and the music scene here and the people that I've met and the colleagues that I've worked with are just amazing out here, musically speaking.
So every day you wake up, you have the opportunity to create, and you're a performer and a musician. What is the best part about being a professional musician for you?
So you're asking these really interesting questions, and then I have to sort of stop and think about them. Well, I guess because I do a lot of different things musically, because, as we know, jazz is not number one in the ratings, let's say. So I don't think anybody goes into jazz expecting to make a ton of money. So obviously we all have to branch out, and do other things. And I also legitimately got interested in doing other things with music. I started producing, which I really, really love, and working with other people, and co-writing. When I first started writing, I was only writing by myself. But then I started co-writing, and so I have about 4 different people that I write with. And I started writing other kinds of music. I started writing, pop and music to a brief and stuff like that. So all those kind of things, I love music, just period. Any kind of music. So if I'm in a studio or performing or anything like that, I'm super happy. I think probably where I feel the most myself is sitting at a piano and writing. And when I started songwriting, that really opened things up for me because I honestly had no clue that I could do it, so when I write something, either instrumentally or again with lyrics, that's, to me, that's the ultimate in creativity, because you're literally creating something from nothing. Obviously when you're on stage, there's opportunities for creating, as well. If I'm performing my own material, then I'm doing something, I'm working from a script that's already been semi-established, and then of course, we diverge from that. This is going away a little bit from your question, but I started, several years ago, I formed a group called Fish to Birds, which is an improvisational vocal group. Now that's an example of completely spontaneous composition on stage in front of an audience. And it's a cappella. We don't write anything. There's nothing planned. We have kind of little forms that we can follow, but musically speaking, we have no idea what we're going to do really before we open our mouth. And that experience really also informed my own, composition, even if I'm doing it, by myself, no audience, anything like that. But it's still a discipline. Even though it's great and fun and wonderful and I love making things, sometimes people just want to sit around, and veg out. So, it's a muscle. There's a certain amount of discipline involved in sitting down and writing. And, I get overwhelmed just like, everybody does, I'm sure. But I think the key is to just sort of, pick a thread and follow it. There's so many different threads that you could follow. So with this particular record that I have coming out right now, that's the thread that I'm following now, those compositions. But there's so much that you could do. But if I get to make music every day, which I generally do, then yeah, I'm pretty happy.
So one of the things that's awfully formative for anybody's brain is like the first live jazz show that they ever saw. So I'm going to contrast this into a part A and B. And first of this is, what was the first live jazz show you saw that blew you away? And if you could get into a time machine and go back and see any show in the history of jazz, how would that first show have influenced the way that you would decide where you're going to go?
Oh, my. You're not asking easy questions. That's a great question. I'm trying to think of the first live jazz show that I saw, because it could have been, my parents took me to so much when I was a kid. Here, I'm going to give a shout out to a family friend. Actually, I do know. Yes, two people. So in Atlanta, now these are not famous people. So in Atlanta, because my father's a musician, he knew a couple of different local performers. One is a singer-songwriter named Cy Timmons, and then there was also a local piano trio. Oh, shoot, and I just thought of his name, Paul Mitchell. There was this fantastic club in Atlanta called Dante's Down the Hatch, which was a trip. It was the owner had literally brought this. He had rebuilt. I don't know how he did it. He had rebuilt some like schooner inside. So the whole thing was like being on, some port in the 1800s or something like that. So my dad would play like in front of the ship, and there was a moat with alligators. So you weren't expecting this answer to your question, I bet. But awesome. He would play in the front. So we would go and watch him play. And he would play mostly classical, some other stuff as well. But inside, when you went to the dining area, which was inside the boat, that's where Paul would play. And first of all, he was so lovely to me. I was a little kid, and I just remember being served, Shirley Temples by the waitstaff, and then Paul was amazing. But he put out a record, but he was actually fantastic and such an example of an unrecognized local talent. And he did tunes like, Windmills of Your Mind and stuff like that. But I just remember being blown away when I was little, going to watch, and of course I loved the environment too, because it was on this, on a boat. And then in terms of being able to go back in time, I know I already referenced, the current concert, but I got to say, the current concert, Keith Jarrett, I would want to see that show. Definitely.
Right on.
There's so many. That's terrible. Yeah. It's terrible for you to ask me that question. I know. But I got to say that one, though. That one, for sure.
Yeah. So, when we do return in earnest to live music, it's been a long time, and lots of this has really, shocked everybody's systems. What do you hope we all realize collectively about the power of live music, both musician and the audience, when we get back to it?
I think it's clear, especially at the very, very beginning of the pandemic when we were in lockdown in earnest, and certainly we were in California, very much locked down here. I think people really utilized all the arts, recorded representations of the arts to kind of get them through it. I mean, I don't think people can really imagine being through this pandemic without having some form of the arts or entertainment. I think it would have been even, lonelier and more stressful, than it was. And I think people, the people that know that already know it. I think the people that maybe take the arts a bit more for granted, hopefully they realize it more. Because, I mean, obviously, as we know, the arts are historically underfunded in this country. And, I hope there's more funding for the arts. I hope there's more, opportunities for clubs to flourish and not struggle. As you probably heard, we had a really legendary, amazing performance space listening room here in LA close called the Blue Whale, which was really tragic because that club fomented so many amazing, players and shows and people's, creativity and compositions in a way that other places, just don't. I hope that there's more. I hope there's more funding, and I hope there's more audience. Musicians are going to make music. You know what I mean? People are going to do what they're going to do. People are going to write. People are going to create. But I just hope that there's more avenues for it. And I hope that people go out and see it. It's really, now that we have been glued to our screens, for such a long time, I hope that people realize, it's hard. You have to get a babysitter. You have to get in your car. You have to go. You have to find parking. I mean, it is kind of a, it's a deal to go out and see a show. But I hope that people realize that there's really no substitute for the energy of being in a room, especially with an improvisational form, like jazz, and getting to watch, music be created on stage. I mean, for me, if I go see somebody's show, especially if it's sort of this really, creative jazz that I experience here and that I'm lucky enough to be able to see and participate in and have so many friends that do. I mean, to me, that's almost like a drug to me, just being out and watching a show. And, to me, it's like watching a play or watching a sporting event or something. I personally get that involved in it. I'm not sure if everybody else does, but I want other people to have that kind of experience. So I'm hopeful, that people will venture out more and yeah, like I said, maybe we'll get more funding because it all takes money, unfortunately.
So everyone has a perception or an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your fans, but ultimately you live your life. Who do you think you are? What's your perception of who you are?
Well, first of all, I'm awesome. No, I'm kidding.
There you go. There's the answer right there. We can just wrap it up. I thought this was going to be the toughest question.
No, I'm kidding. Well, obviously God, what am I? I mean, I sort of bounce between being, extremely serious and extremely silly. I mean, I'm definitely, I tilt towards the geeky side of things. I mean, I'm curious. I can be a very hard worker. I can also be lazy. I hope I'm a good friend. I hope I'm a good, sister and daughter and aunt and godmother and all those things. I try to, it's kind of like the thing where you go camping where you're supposed to, leave the campsite better than you found it. I mean, I try to do those kind of things, as much as I can. But yeah, I mean, I think just sort of, I don't know, curious, quirky, a little bit geeky, definitely serious, but also not. Hopefully a good sense of humor. Hopefully people will agree with me and not be like, oh, she's delusional. That's it.
Right on. That was the hardest one. I saved it for last. Thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for putting jazz front and center and interviewing me today and having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest singers and players in Atlanta, Los Angeles, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Adrianne for her time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.